Hello there, this is PJ. I'm in my office this morning. This is the sixth Sunday after Epiphany, February 13th, 2022. This morning is one of those Sundays where the first reading comes alongside the gospel reading. When I look deeper into the text, I really rested in the fact that this text today is not only about how things are, but it is about how the disciples are to live. This is a text in a story where we benefit by knowing the context. Right before our reading in verses 13 through 16, Jesus goes up the hill to pray. He then picks the 12 who will form his inner circle. Coming down the hill, there was a great crowd. The crowd came from all over, including Jerusalem, Judea, Tyre, and Sidon. One of the aspects that can be intriguing is the following. They came to hear him and to be healed. Jesus responds in the opposite order. He heals them and then he teaches them. When I see this, there are two things that come to mind. One, just like last week, Jesus knows what they need first and gives it to them. Then, as we look at ministry, maybe we as churches will do well in meeting individuals' physical or emotional needs, and then sharing the good news with them. Jesus heals them all. This is an event that is truly a communal event. I think that we can lean into and remember that our lives are to be community and are not to be individualistic. Jesus moves from healing to his teaching moment. Last week on the boat, we did not hear any of his message. This week, we get one of his longest teaching moments presented in Luke. We get to hear him speak on blessings and woes, 4 of each. Jesus clarifies for us who is blessed and who is woeful. Language can be a tricky thing. I definitely do not have a firm grasp on language, and I'm also not an expert in geography. However, I want to plant some seeds for you to think about. When I read this story in full context and I see Jesus praying on the hill/mountain and coming down to the level, I think of a base of the mountain. However, maybe level is more than a physical description of where the story takes place. Level, in many places, often refers to places of corpse, disgrace, idolatry, suffering, misery, hunger, annihilation, and mourning. Professor Ronald J. Allen paints these words that were strung together. So maybe when we hear the blessings and the woes with these descriptors as a backdrop, they can have a deeper impact for us. It will also help us to know that in the crowd there were individuals across the spectrum, though most of them were mostly poor and living under Roman occupation, as the Tuesday morning Bible study observed. However, there was some diversity in the crowd, and Jesus had a message for everyone. And some of his message might be a tough pill to swallow. We definitely see a contrast in this passage. Robert Darden highlights 3 components when we examine these contrasts. First, we see that blessings and woes are paired together. For example, blessed are you who are poor is paired with woe to you who are rich. There is a balance that Jesus is sharing. When I was reading through the commentaries, I heard a quote that said, "Trouble doesn't last long." This then led me on a journey of chasing down the rabbit hole. There is a book, Trouble Don't Last, by Shelley Pearsall, and with it being Black History Month, I thought it was very appropriate to highlight. In the book, 11-year-old Samuel was born of Master Hackler's slave, and working that Kentucky farm is the only life he ever known. Until one night, in 1859 that is, with no warning, cranky old Harrison, a fellow slave, pulls Samuel from his bed, and together they run. The journey north seems much more frightening than Master Hackler ever was, and Samuel was not sure what freedom means aside from running, hiding, and starving. But as they move from one refuge to the next on the Underground Railroad, Samuel uncovers the secret of his own past and future. And old Harrison begins to see past a whole lifetime of hurt to the promise of a new life in a poignant reunion in Canada. In our Bible study, we wrestled with the blessings and the woes and what they meant for them and what they mean for us today. As I reflected on the study and dug deeper into the scriptures and commentary, I believe that Jesus was attempting to be very clear and that his words were very clear and in my time and space. I find comfort in knowing that those who weep, they will laugh again. The second component might be one that challenges us, but maybe opens up a new way of thinking for us. The blessings are in the present tense, while the woes are in the future tense. The good news that Jesus seems to be sharing with the crowd is that good times are ahead if the faithful endures. If you are like me, there may be some disconnect. I mean, if we look deep into the mirror, many of us who reside in Door County and make Bayview Lutheran our home see us in the woe crowd. Maybe the connection can be that we who are in the woeful area can minister to those who are in the blessed area. As Christians, we are called to feed the poor, comfort the afflicted, and house the homeless. We have the capability to give. Our giving should not be a giving of just financial. It is one thing to write a check, yet it is quite another thing to volunteer at a homeless shelter, serve at a soup kitchen, or mentor a student. 2011 was a unique year for me in the student ministry that I served in. Much of our time was serving to those without. Multiple times a month, we were serving meals to the homeless under the bridge, serving meals in the men's homeless shelter, or playing games with children in the domestic violence shelter. There were many who did not like our ministry emphasis. However, for us, our high school students were trying to live out their baptismal vows that they had just committed to, especially the promise of serve all people, following the example of Jesus. The third component is that the blessing and the woes are in the second person, you. In our Bible study, we compared the Sermon on the Plain to the Sermon on the Mount. In the conversation, we took a look at the word you, though we did not go into it too deeply. I shared with them that when you leave today, you may have more questions than answers. Well, maybe here is one of the answers to the newly formed questions. While this message is in the second person, the Sermon on the Mount has the listeners addressed in the third person. There is a reason for word choice. Each reader is being addressed. To comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable was first written by Peter Dunn as one of the roles of journalism. This phrase was taken up by such radical social activists as Mary Mother Jones and Dorothy Day. They took this phrase to heart, challenging those in power and championing those in need. If there is ever a passage in the Bible where these words ring true, it is today's passage. The you in this passage point to you and to me. The poor and hungry who gathered around Jesus are still with us today. Let me make it clear. Jesus' words are not just a suggestion. They are a mandate. And today, we take the mandate to heart. Our children and youth have asked the church to respond by giving food to our food pantry. You have responded with a large donation. Dory and the children led the way with a competition on who will win the Super Bowl, and those donations will go to the Community Emergency Fund. The Community Emergency Fund has also been helped today with the chili cook-off and last week's noisy offering. Because of this generosity, people in our community who are in need are able to be helped. It is Black History Month. 10 years ago this weekend, I walked into a dilapidated building in Indianapolis. I was the only white face in the crowd. It was the most joyful service that I had seen, and there was evidence everywhere that though they had very little, there was strong evidence of a food pantry, support for the local prison ministry, and they offered English as a second language tutoring programs. They were earnestly living out this sermon. The paradox was there, weeping and laughing, singing and crying. Our African American siblings have been persecuted over the last 200 years. Their churches embrace this text. It is highlighted in their songs and anthems and championed in the pulpit from whispers to shouts. Then, as a campus chaplain at SMSU, we were in Chicago over New Year's break and went to an all African American church service, and they welcomed us with open arms, and the worship experience was like no other. Elizabeth, one of the students who made the journey, still talks about this overwhelming joy and their extraordinary hats. I think that they know the message that Jesus spoke on the level was spoken to them, for them, and of them. We can learn from them. In closing, I want to circle back to the definition of level and ask you a question. Level, in many places, often refer to places of corpse, disgrace, idolatry, suffering, misery, hunger, annihilation, and mourning. The question is the following: how do we, at Bayview, manifest the ministry of Jesus in the midst of the level places of life? Amen. Have a great day.